Among Us, Fall Guys, dare I say Minecraft, Dead Cells, Undertale, Hollow Knight, The Binding of Isaac, Braid, some fucking game named Fez, according to this article, Phasmophobia, Stardew Valley, Limbo, Spelunky. Oh my god, is this really okay, you know what, this list is way too long. How about this? It's a pretty common trend, especially in the past couple of years, to see these stories of small indie development teams making wildly successful games that have been enjoyed by millions of people. Obviously, that list I just read goes on and on, so if I didn't read out your favorite popular indie title, you know, chill, alright? I'm reading some list off of some random article I found. But I guess it also kind of demonstrates my point. The story of a small development team consisting of only a handful of people coming out with a new passion project, releasing their small title into the world only to find out that that passion project that they had ended up doing way better than they anticipated. That's all not entirely out of the ordinary to see these days. I mean, just look at Among Us. I'm pretty sure that game has more downloads than Warzone at this point. Well, Death's Door came out a few days ago, and it's got a pretty similar story. Two people coming together with a very limited budget and, well, I mean, I was going to say limited manpower, but I guess that sort of became obvious when I said that there were only two of them, right? Each one of these people juggled different aspects of the game in mind, building off of a previous game known as Titan Souls that they had both slapped together in a weekend-long excursion at a place. See, I don't exactly know if I'm going to be pronouncing this right, so bear with me if I mess it up, but I think it's called Ludum Dare Game Jam number 28. Death's Door obviously took a little longer to make, 3.5 years actually. But holy shit, was it absolutely worth it. Death's Door is a game that covers the theme of, well, death. Although that may sound incredibly depressing, the game's take on death through its charming yet bleak atmosphere and art style, its characters and their personal motivations on how they deal with death, and most importantly, its wonderfully crafted soundtrack kept the message, or at least the message that I've gathered, is that death is not something to be feared, and is nothing more than the natural cycle of life. You play as a reaper, or a crow basically, whose job it is to gather souls for commission at the organization you work for. You are immortal in your gray little homeworld, and your first job is to collect a large or giant soul in particular, which unexpectedly gets stolen from you after a much larger asshole-looking crow bonks you on the back of the head for it. This story branches off into something deeper, when you learn that you are now stuck in the world of the living, where you can now age and face mortality. Unless you can manage to collect your large soul back. Now, I don't want to get into anything any further, because I don't really know how much or how little I'm supposed to say in a review of a game, or even if it really matters. This is my first sort of attempt at something like this, so I apologize if it's really bad. But at the same time, I also don't even know if what I'm saying is entirely accurate. The story that I've told is what I've sort of gathered from my experience. I didn't look for a summary, I didn't go on the Reddit or the wiki in order to see what the actual meaning of it all was. I wanted to have my own raw experience and idea of what I thought the game was about. So with that being said, I guess I should probably talk about some type of review things now, right? So let's start with the story, because I've already sort of dipped my toe into that topic already. The story of Death's Door on the surface is simple. Get your soul back. Not your personal one, that is, obviously, but the one that you were supposed to get in the first place. Unfortunately, that becomes a little difficult to do, which can be seen as both good and bad. Good because if it wasn't difficult, there wouldn't exactly be any conflict or plot, and therefore there wouldn't be much of a reason to play the game in the first place. And bad because in order for you to resolve the issue of your inevitable mortality caused by a door being opened from an ungathered soul, you have to go on a pretty perilous adventure filled with dangerous enemies and brutal bosses who have been pretty good at avoiding death thus far. That's all I want to say. I know I said that I was done talking about the story a moment ago, but I felt like there was a tiny bit more that I could add on to. Overall, I thought the story was good. Sure, the general theme of it is something that we've seen before, but the execution of it was told beautifully in a mere 7-hour experience. The combat in Death's Door is probably the thing I have most issue with. Well, aside from the level design on the frog area, but I'll get to that later. The combat in Death's Door is not bad at all by any means, but once again, it doesn't necessarily do anything quite new. Again, that's not a bad thing. I was just sort of surprised that by the end of the game, the way I was fighting the enemies had been the same since the beginning of it all. Your little playable crow has a handful of movesets. A normal fast attack, a slow charge up attack, a rolling overhead attack, and a couple different magic spells that you gather along your journey. The thing is, those spells don't really do anything different from one another during combat. Sure, your fire can go through enemies and the bomb has an AoE, but it never really feels like there were any situations that I felt like, at least, that I needed to use any of them over the bow that you start off with. So as far as combat goes, I thought it was fine. It was definitely finite and simplistic in what you were able to do with it, but it was also very well polished, which I'd much rather prefer over an overcomplicated amount of movesets that all feel clunky. When it comes to bosses, I thought there were actually some really unique ideas in them. Although I will say that the progression and difficulty of the bosses felt pretty sporadic and didn't really follow a very linear path, on the next one being harder to deal with than the last one. I remember facing the witch, who was basically Yababa from Spirited Away, and thinking it was a nicely balanced fight for that point in the game, and then immediately being confused when I fought the giant egotistical frog, because it felt insanely easier than the first one, and I ended up doing it on my first attempt. And then after that, the next one spiking in difficulty, and anyway, you get my point. My biggest gripes within Death's Door were very minor, the biggest one being the level design on the Frog King Guy's area. I constantly found myself getting lost there. I spent more time backtracking and trying to figure out which areas I had been to and which ones I hadn't during most of my time there, due to the fact that every single section in that level looked and felt exactly the same to me. I remember progressing to an area, dying, then going back and trying to find my way back to the spot I was at before, then getting lost and having to comb the entire area to figure out which place I had not been to yet, then getting lost again and winding up back at the beginning. Now, this could all be by design, with the intention of causing a sense of misdirection and confusion in the player. Or, who knows, it could also have been an oversight on the developer's behalf when making that level. Or, most likely, it could just be my own fucking incompetence when playing it. Which leaves me with my final talking point of this video, and why I found this game to be the masterpiece that it is. The music. The music in Death's Door really lifted the entire experience for me. It not only set the stage for each area of the game, but it also had the ability to override my emotions, making me feel things that the devs wanted me to feel, while amplifying some that I was already in the middle of feeling. I'd be wandering around a temple or castle, with music playing that made me want to search every inch of the place. Then, the closer I found my way to the boss's lair, fighting through their endless guard of enemies outside, the music would change into something heroic, like I could take on anyone. Then, when I finally fought the boss, the music changed again, this time into something more chaotic, giving me a sense of uncertainty without completely making me feel like everything was utterly hopeless. And then, in victory, after beating the boss and having that "yes, take that, fuck you" feeling coursing through my veins, the Gravedigger's song would play, completely changing my perspective on my now defeated foe, as their hidden story on who they were and why they had become that way became revealed to me, making me not only want to pay my respects, but also feel sadness, like maybe I had done something wrong, or that my previous grievances with them were petty without taking their perspectives into consideration. And that's it. Death's Door is a beautiful game, one that I think anyone can enjoy and appreciate if they decide to get it. And although I don't necessarily think it'll be on the same level of popularity with Among Us or Minecraft in the category of indie games, but I do definitely believe it belongs somewhere amongst that list I was reading of successful indie titles. Now, I know it's expected of me in a review to leave some type of number or rating that I feel best suits the entire experience, but I'm not. At least not for this one. But I guess if I have to, I'll give it some bullshit rating. 2 bowls of cereal, a boot, and an apple. And no, there's no hidden meaning behind those objects. I just feel like it's up to each person to decide whether or not they like something or not. Fuck it, 4 out of 5.
I know.